Much of Marxism has been disproved by history. What remains, or he calls it a residue of fire, what remains is the fact that exploitation or sorrow exists, that is due to the ownership of private property, and that it can be destroyed. But he looks for solutions towards Buddhism. If you look at Marx's and Ambedkar's theory of Buddhism and the Buddha and the Dhamma, what I said is there, what he does is he asks Marxist questions and gives Buddhist answers. He has Buddha leaving his home not because he saw an old man, a sick man, and a dead man. He said that that's impossible for somebody to reach that age of 20 to missing midnight. He left his home in order to avoid a water conflict between the Pakyas and the Kolis, a neighboring oligarchy, Gamasanga. And then as he wandered around, he said, well, this conflict is one conflict, but what about the general process of conflict between human beings, conflict between nations, conflict between peoples, conflict between classes, these go on, how do we solve these? So he looks for answers to that, and he finds the answers in a theory of personal change and recognition of rationality. So Ambedkar's Buddha is a very rational person who emphasizes Dhamma as morality, moral relationships between human beings, ethical relationships between human beings, and argues that the freedom, or nirvana, and freedom can be achieved in this world. And in fact, in Buddha and his Dhamma, he's greeted by these first five disciples and saying that freedom can be achieved in this world. So this is his theme, that the answers can be found in Buddhism, that Buddhism creates a rational society, and that within the Sangha you have voluntary communist relations without private property, without ownership, which provide a configuration or a premonition of the future society. Finally, one of the final acts, I think I can end with, he was overseeing, as a law minister, he was overseeing the passage of the women's bill, the Hindu code bill, to give women rights to Parliament. And as we know, this failed to pass. In fact, the debate on it was more heated, and Ambedkar was probably more criticized as a modern Manu for this rather than for anything else. When he resigned, NATO failed to back him up, he resigned. In the meantime, other things have happened to this increase of disillusionment with Marxism, including the communist Chinese invasion of Tibet, the invasion of Eastern Europe, and so on. So he was by then quite critical. But he made a very classic statement. He said inequality is the soul of Hindu society, inequality between human beings, between gender and gender, sex and sex, between class and class, caste and caste. To go on passing economic resolutions without legislation, without attempting to clear away this inequality, is like trying to build a callus on a dung heap. And I think this statement today remains today. We are still facing, in spite of all of the promises and glory of globalization and economic development in China and India, we are still facing the dung heap. Dung heap of women's oppression. If you look at women's position in society, that the sex ratio is not declining. Baby girls are still dying at a much faster rate than boys. The whole concept that Marxism put forward in missing women still holds very true. It's held true through periods of what we want status development and liberalization. It holds true today. Untouchability still remains. There are countless villages throughout India in which elites can still not get straight water out of the same cup, in which elite women still have to wait in line and take water last, but they get it all from the village well. There's untouchability in the classroom where often touchable students, caste-independent students, will refuse to take food that's cooked by elite cooks, elite teachers. So these problems are still there. In the cities, discrimination in employment, discrimination at all levels still remain. In the U.S., problems of racism still remain. I woke today to find good news on the television that Barack Obama has won the Democratic caucus in Iowa. For those of you who don't know, Barack Obama is now the main Democratic candidate for president. He is the son of a Kenyan and a white American anthropologist who grew up in the U.S. He's not only African American, he's also progressive. He was opposed to the Iraq War from the beginning. So it's a hopeful son. I was in the U.S. at the time Mayawati had won her victory. And the thought of the woman being not only chief minister of India's largest state, but with the possibility of becoming prime minister. In spite of all the faults and all that we can criticize, it seems like exciting things are happening. Well, the New York Times has run a long article of Obama. They showed a picture of his Kenyan grandmother. And there she was sitting in front of a hut that looked exactly like an Adivasi hut in Dhule district, Nandurbar district. So, Obama coming up is a significant aspect of globalization, I think, in the sense that what is happening is, in spite of efforts of nation states to stop it, immigration is continuing. These immigrants are flooding into the U.S. The U.S. is looking to become a majority non-white society fairly soon. If it isn't already, it may be already, I don't know. There's no, even among the main Democratic candidates, there's no male main candidate. They're Italian, something like that. So, this possibility to me is a very exciting one. But to understand and just, what happens at the political level is only one step. It's certainly not a revolution, but it's a sign of movements that are things that are going on under the surface of society. And I think to understand these, we need both Marx with his very powerful analysis of the economic forces in relation to production, and people like Du Bois with his analysis of race, Omvedt with his analysis, and Fully and Omvedt with their analysis of caste and others. And I hope that as students at CISS, we can take the main lesson of Buddha, Aksavi Gopal, or that of Dhule, who emphasized Satyashodak, or Tukaram, who said Satya, Satya Mankyana, Vani Mani Nani Bahumati. I made my own mind a witness to truth and untruth. I never heeded the opinion of the majority. You have to think to yourself. You have to look at society as it stands, analyze it, see how we can move forward. In the words of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, educate, agitate, and organize. Thank you.
Ideas to very powerful and very significant in the face of constant aggression. Thank you very much, Professor. Your lecture was extremely political and brought into the focus history and political ideologies, clarifying factors, making us very lucid theoretical discussion. Now we can take a few more questions from the audience. Any questions?
I'm Chandrasekhar from ISBS, International Institute for Population Science, the Nehru Institute of the International Institute for Population Science. My question is very simple. As you said that, I don't know, it may not be in this regard directly. How do you, counter the indirect discrimination? There are direct discrimination which you have given examples. It is very difficult to counter the indirect discrimination regarding, a society or individuals. This is really a long-term challenge because people or from one group or one, thought or one way are so organized. They're already, as whether academia or any other science you see, they're so organized. It's difficult to change their views in short term. So we now do not face many times because we have got education, we know our rights, but it is very difficult, to break those indirect, discrimination because they are hidden and it is difficult to break. Thank you.
Well, obviously this requires a multi-level area of action. But I would say that if in any major institution discrimination, you find that important social groups of the society are not represented, you can say that there's indirect discrimination. And countering it requires, well, one important aspect is affirmative action reservations, whatever you say. You should say we must place people in these positions. Then you need education. The problem of education in Indian society is still very backward in terms of every level of education, from primary education on to the university level. So various and then what I find here is so strong is this belief in merit versus reservation. That if certain groups of people occupy a privileged position in society, it's because of their merit. So this has to be countered by a cultural and ideological attack, I think. So I would say multifaceted.
My question is very general. What is supposed to be done for the upliftment of marginalized? Like how to relate to this present situation? How, for the upliftment of the marginalized section in the present day scenario?
I think the question is not so much upliftment, but of the marginalized aspect, the transformation of the whole society so that sections are not marginalized. So the problem is we should not focus only on the marginalized, we have to focus on the social system that creates that marginalization.
Student of Development Studies, second year. Ma'am, my question is with regards to the comments that you made in the presentation about Ambedkar's opposition to problems that, as you said, that's one of the major problems that Ambedkar found that Marxism was economic determinism, and then you went on to give the example of a building and base and superstructure, etc. Here I have with me a quotation from Ralph Miliband's book, Marxism and Politics. Ralph Miliband goes on giving paras after paras, trying to explain how Marx was not an economic determinist and he has been thoroughly misunderstood. Can I quote you, if you don't mind, a para from how Ralph Miliband is quoting Marx from Capital? He says that same economic base, because of innumerable different empirical circumstances, natural environment, racial relations, external historical influences, etc., will show infinite variations and gradations of appearances. So, it is also said that, a theoretical error pushed to its limit shows Marx an economic determinant. How do you respond to that?
No, I would say Marx, and, to the point where later both he and Engels criticized those who were calling them Marxists, calling themselves Marxists, for having a one-sided economic deterministic view of history. He argued that ideas were important, but his basic contribution is not there. His basic contribution is emphasizing the way in which the material factors work. Second, I think and material in the broader sense, including human social relations of production. Second, in fact, he did not really make a place for women in this theory or for racial groups in this theory and so forth. So later Marxists, very often became more and more economic determinists, and they neglected even the qualifications. But they were picking up. I think they were picking up on something in Marxist doctrine.
And so my question was that with this explanation, how relevant is or how appropriate is the criticism that Marx is an economic determinist? In the sense, Marx, I'm not trying to undermine the importance that Marx gave to economic base, but is it appropriate to call him a determinist?
I don't think it makes much difference whether we call him something or not. If you look at the totality of his theory, he has a theory of how capitalism works, he has a theory of how the forces of production develop when they come into conflict with the relations of production. This is what is important. Adding or subtracting the word determinism doesn't make too much sense. If we say that Marxism was, as I said, what Weber did in many ways, what Ambedkar did also was to add some points to this. And in stressing when they stressed the role of ideas and ideological religious factors, they were stressing something that Marx had neglected. This was also needed to be done. But, you know, in a sense that you can say Marx had laid a certain kind of base, but you have to go beyond that. You know, if Marxism is a science, there should be no problem with that. I mean, after all, we don't say that Einstein revised and Einstein was a revisionist because he didn't agree with Newton on something. He developed a theory.